welcome everyone to episode 3 of Awakenings. I'm your host, Steve Torment. Tonight we will be launching my new format. I'm sure it'll be a scream. Tonight I'll start out with a few new segments that I've designed that are sliced to entice. The first of which is going to be called the Metal Edge. Tonight on the Metal Edge, I will talk about the metal scene. I'll discuss some of my favorite bands, albums, and I'll provide you with some headbanging metal news. We'll move on from there and do my next new frightful segment called Horrocalypse. On Horrocalypse, I'll talk about everything horror, such as films, television, video games, and of course, HorrorCon. Next, I'll go into another new disgusting segment called the Killer Cut. The Killer Cut is Awakening's own version of Serial Killer of the Week. Then we'll move on to a seductive segment I call Scream Queens, where I select and obsess over the week's Scream Queen. Finally, we'll move on to the main event, The Awakening, and peel back the maggot-infested flesh of some of the world's most infamous cases of disturbingly unexplained. On tonight's Awakenings, I will be bringing you the true horrifying story of Skinwalker Ranch. This case has it all: UFOs, phantasms, hellish creatures seemingly from another dimension, cattle mutilations, and more. Tonight on the Metal Edge, I've scoured the bowels of the underworld to find our featured band, and have elected to subject you to bone-shattering double bass drums of George Colias, the face-melting guitar riffs of Brian Kingsland, the soul-shaking bass guitar of Brad Paris, and the dooming death metal growls and guitars of Carl Sanders. I am talking about the Egyptian death metal band Nile. Nile hails from Greenville, South Carolina, and formed in 1993. They are considered, according to Wikipedia, to be brutal technical death metal. They are currently signed to Relapse Nuclear Blast Records. They have 8 albums, and each is significant in the metal scene. Their first release, Amongst the Catacombs of Nephrin Ka, was released in 1998 and features several tracks which are now considered to be the staple of any of Nile's greatest hits albums. Songs such as Serpent-Headed Mask, The Howling of Jinn, and Ramses Bringer War are among my favorites of any death metal catalog. In 2000, Nile returned with their sophomore release, Black Seeds of Vengeance. The title track, Black Seeds of Vengeance, is a personal favorite along with Masturbating the War God. 2002 is when I first discovered Nile. I had to kind of backtrack and catch up on those 2 albums and get into this album. I had entered my local music store, and the sales associate recommended their current and third release, which is In Their Darkened Shrines. It is, in my opinion, their best album ever. Every song on the album is fucking fantastic. As with any Nile release, it's just extremely brilliant musical talent there. The songs worth mentioning are Unis, Slayer of Gods, Excretion Text, and Sarcophagus. In 2005, we saw the release of Annihilation of the Wicked, which features songs such as Cast Down the Heretics, Sacrifice unto Sabik, and Lash to the Sage Stick. Ithapalic was released in 2007 and features As He Creates, So He Destroys, and the title track Ithapalic, among others. In 2009, Nile released Those Whom the Gods Detest, which included Coffer and Hittite Dung Incantation. At the Gates of Sithu was released in 2012, which includes When My Wrath Is Done. Fantastic song. Completely mind-fucking-blowing. In 2015, Nile released their album What Should Not Be in Earth. This album features songs Call of Destruction and Negating the Abominable Coils of Apep, 2 of my favorite Nile songs. Finally, we have 2019's Vile Neurotic Rites, which features the track Vile Neurotic Rites and Long Shadows of Dread, 2 more of my favorite Nile tracks. As a death metal vocalist myself and a huge fan of the death metal genre, I would place Nile at the very pinnacle. They are the elite of the elite, in my opinion. I highly recommend them to anyone that is a fan of that genre of music, or anyone that likes Egyptian mythology, as all their songs are typically based in Egyptian mythology. Moving on to some metal news. Rammstein has released that their singer Till Lindemann does not in fact have coronavirus, which is fucking good news. However, Death Angel drummer Will Carroll and Testament singer Chuck Billy do indeed have the coronavirus. Positive energy goes out to you guys and to your bands and your family members. In other metal news, Lamb of God live streamed last year's Resurrection Fest live with chat from Mark Morton yesterday, which is actually today, but you guys will be seeing this tomorrow. The stream took place on Notfest's website, so go check that out, guys. Lamb of God is a fantastic band. I had the pleasure of seeing them live at Mayhem Fest in Indianapolis in 2010, along with acts such as Five Finger Death Punch, Korn, and Rob Zombie. I have to add here that they really put on an excellent show. Moving on in metal music, the news here on Metal Edge, it looks like bands Candlemass, In This Moment, Parkway Drive, August Burns Red, Asking Alexandra, Atreyu, Avatar, big whoop to Avatar, Belphegor, Bring Me the Horizon, Cannibal Corpse, another good one, Carcass, Chevelle, Crowbar, The Deftones, Devil Driver, Exodus, Gojira, and Hatebreed all have new albums coming out this year, so go check those out. One thing you guys will learn as we go along here with Metal Edge is that I love all genres of rock and metal. I love music from Stevie Nicks to Alice in Chains to Slayer. I don't discriminate when it comes to metal or rock. While I tend to gravitate more towards bands like Nile, Amon Amarth, Cradle of Filth, Dimmu Borgir, and Mortician, I do still love to throw on a Meatloaf album and rock out to I'd Do Anything for Love, but I won't do that. Some notable mentions, if you're into bands of the death metal persuasion, are Mortician, Obituary, Arch Enemy, 60 Under, Morbid Angel, Deicide, Vader, Cradle of Filth, Dimmu Borgir, Rings of Saturn, Lamb of God, and Devil Driver. Until next time, this has been The Metal Edge. Up next is another new segment I call the Horocalypse. And tonight on Horocalypse, I will be talking one of my favorite horror franchises. On September 18th, 1987, director Clive Barker and producer Christopher Figg introduced us to a horrifying tale that spawned one of the scariest horror franchises of all time, and the terrifying horror icon known only as Pinhead, who was played by Doug Bradley. Hellraiser possessed our nightmares for decades. I, for one, had many sleepless nights huddled under my covers as a kid, fearing the Cenobites were coming to get me so the Pinhead could tear my soul apart. The franchise features Part 1, Hellraiser, Part 2, Hellbound, Part 3, Hell on Earth, Part 4, Bloodline, Part 5, Inferno, Part 6, Hellseeker, Part 7, Deader, Part 8, Hellworld, Part 9, Revelations, and Part 10, Judgment. The films are centered around a mysterious puzzle box, which is called, I believe it's called Lamention Gateway, I think is what it's called. Anyways, it's a puzzle box, which opens a gateway to the hell-like realm of the Cenobites, an order of formerly human monsters who harvest human souls to torture in sadistic experiments. If you haven't partaken in these sinister films and witnessed the unholy hell raised by Pinhead and the Cenobites, then you are definitely missing out. Hellraiser films are also comic books, so get those as well. And if you're a big nerd like me and you love action figures, McFarlane Toys has created an action figure of Pinhead as well as a line of Cenobites called the Tortured Souls line, which features incarnations of various Cenobites. Moving on from the Hellraiser series and getting into another infamous horror franchise, that is the fear-inspiring Resident Evil. It seems that Resident Evil 3, the remake for PS4 and PC and Xbox One, is coming out with an asynchronous multiplayer mode called Resident Evil Resistance. A final open beta was planned for this week before next week's full launch of the game, but the beta has been delayed on Steam and PS4 due to apparent issues that they're having. Capcom released a statement apologizing for the delay. Full launch of Resident Evil 3 is to take place April 3rd, so be sure to get that and check out the new features such as the third-person view mode. Next on Horocalypse is upcoming horror films that are to be released this year. First on the list has already been released to DVD and Blu-ray, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing it. And matter of fact, I just came back from the Red Box and where I'd rented it. I'm going to be watching it after the show, so I'm pretty jazzed about that. And I am talking about the Grudge reboot. The original films inspired fear, all around the world to people who've seen them. They're some of the scarier movies out there, in my opinion at least. I'm hoping the Grudge reboot lives up to, the hype. Other films coming out this year is The Turning, The Lodge, The Invisible Man, which is already out as I understand, Saint Maud, Candyman the reboot, Last Night in Soho, Halloween Kills. Can't wait for that one. I'm always a big fan of Michael Myers. Army of the Dead, Antebellum, Run, Spiral, A Quiet Place 2, which I'm also excited about, and finally Antlers, just to name a few. In upcoming horror television for 2020, we can look forward to shows such as The Outsider, 10 After Midnight, The Lost Boys, Black Summer, Kingdom, Marianne, The Haunting of Hill House, which will be a new season. I believe it'll be like season 2. Lock and Key, The Walking Dead is coming out with a new show called World Beyond. Penny Dreadful is also coming out with a new show called City of Angels. Aries, American Horror Story will be coming out with a new season. Into the Dark, Dracula, Nosferatu, Castle Rock will be having a new season also, and The Terror. I'm looking forward to horror convention season this year, as I'm hoping to attend at least one of them. The two that are the most prominent are Horrorhound Weekend and Days of the Dead. I'm just really hoping I get to go to one or both. We'll see what happens. I know for Horrorhound Weekend, the event spans a weekend and runs from September 18th to the 20th. Hopefully the coronavirus is resolved by then and doesn't cause a problem. Days of the Dead, I believe, is like July 17th through like the 19th or something like that. Both of them are in Indianapolis. Be definitely looking forward to getting to those. Last year's Horrorhound Weekend featured the likes of Elvira, Lynn Shay, Matthew Lillard, who played Shaggy in Scooby-Doo, David Arquette, who was Officer Dewey in Scream, Jamie Kennedy, also from Scream, Shannon Elizabeth from American Pie, Elizabeth Berkley from Saved by the Bell, and Patrick Flannery from Boondock Saints, Christy Swanson from The Chase, I think is what that movie's called, Rachel True from The Craft, John Five, guitarist for Rob Zombie, Rada Mitchell, Dina Meyer, who was in Starship Troopers, Kate Siegel, Carla Harvey of the Butcher Babies, Scott Ian of Anthrax, and the Christine Carr, among many others not mentioned here. So that was last year's lineup for Horrorhound Weekend. I'm looking forward to seeing what they've got this year, but they haven't released that information yet, and once they do, I will let you guys know. So while being sad that I missed out on meeting the ever gorgeous Elvira, I am looking forward to this year's list. I think I kind of said that weird, but anyway, I'll keep you guys posted when I have that information for you, and this has been Horrocalypse. Up next is a new segment also called Killer Cut. This week's serial killer of the week is none other than the Blood Countess herself, Elizabeth Bathory. In the early 1600s, a young and beautiful Hungarian noblewoman named Countess Elizabeth Bathory feared growing old and wanted to forever preserve her youth and beauty. With the help of her accomplices, Elizabeth began luring beautiful young women to her castle, where she would fuck them and then murder them during these acts of eroticism. I don't know about you guys, but that's kind of hot in my opinion. Maybe I'm just fucking morbid, but that's just hot as shit. Anyways, after which she then bathes in their warm blood. Elizabeth believed that the blood of her victims was a type of fountain of youth, and in one case she so admired the beauty of her victim that she ordered the girl to be stripped nude and taken outside into the castle courtyard just under Elizabeth's window. And then she ordered the guards to continuously drench this young maiden in buckets of freezing water until she was frozen solid. This way, Elizabeth could look out her window and admire the beautiful nude body of this girl, and the ice that formed around the girl acted as a mirror or a fractured mirror rather. And this way, when Elizabeth Bathory would look out her window, she would see dozens upon dozens of these beautiful nude women staring up at her. Um, at her trial, Elizabeth was charged and found guilty of the murders of over 650 women. She holds the Guinness Book of World Records as being the most prolific female serial killer in history. As her punishment, she was bricked up alive inside of a wall of her castle. If you haven't heard of the story of the Dracula-like Elizabeth Bathory, which is in fact a true story, I suggest you reading about her. Elizabeth Bathory is your killer cut of the week. While Elizabeth Bathory does get my blood pumping, allow me to introduce you to another segment that I call Scream Queens. These ladies of horror and metal music wield long slender legs, bedeviling breasts, apocalyptic asses, and screams to rival any siren or banshee. So this week I have picked the first Scream Queen. This week's Scream Queen is in this moment's Maria Brink. No female can scream quite like Maria, nor can they look as gorgeous as her doing it. I have to admit, I have a huge celebrity crush on Maria Brink. But that's not why I selected her for this week's Scream Queen. If you have ever listened to Maria Brink sing, then you can understand. If you need a song to reference, allow me to point out in this moment's 2010 track, The Gun Show from the album A Star-Crossed Wasteland. Maria Brink has been awarded the Rock Goddess of the Year in 2013 and 2015, as well as being awarded Hottest Chick in Metal in 2010. She has collaborated with acts such as Five Finger Death Punch, Rob Halford of Judas Priest, Taylor Momsen of the Pretty Reckless, Motionless in White, Lizzie Hale of Hailstorm, Papa Roach, and P.O.D. Maria is also an accomplished painter and has her own website for her artwork and fan page. I will be sure to include these links in the comments down below. Please be sure to check out In This Moment if you're unfamiliar with them, and support the ever-lovely and ever-talented Maria Brink. This has been Scream Queens. Keeping this momentum going, I want to move on in this program and dive right into the Awakening segment for tonight. We are going to venture into the darkness and the madness known as Skinwalker Ranch. But before we begin, I want to explain that I'm only going to elaborate on some of the events that was going on, or is going on, at Skinwalker Ranch. The reason I'm doing this is because there's so much information, there's so much going on, and so much documented stuff that I just don't have the room. I mean, we could sit here for hours and talk about this place. So I've condensed it down as best as I could without skipping too much of the important stuff. So this is going to be kind of a brief synopsis in a way of what's going on over there. I would really invite you guys to either watch the documentary or read the book, both of the same name and both by the same guys. It's called Hunt for the Skinwalker. It's been co-authored by George Knapp and Colm Kelleher. So check those out because they go into far more detail than what I'm about to. And I've read the book and I've seen the documentary, and it's what inspired me to do this segment. Skinwalker Ranch, also known as Sherman Ranch, is a property located in the Uinta Basin on approximately 488 acres, situated southeast of Ballard, Utah. It is supposedly a hotbed site of paranormal and UFO-related activity. The Uinta Basin has always been home to strange tales of odd lights, sounds, visions. In the 1950s, Joseph Jr. Hicks, a local high school teacher, began cataloging people's stories of their experiences in the basin. Along with Dr. Frank Salisbury, Hicks published a book on the subject in 1974. Sightings of strange creatures and UFOs continued in the area, and the mythology became entrenched. Okay, so what I didn't really kind of elaborate on it here, but the legends of this place go back beyond white man, before white man ever came to what is now known as America. The Ute Indians and the Navajo, who lived right next to each other, they were bordered to each other, fought over this land, and that the Skinwalker Ranch now sits on. The Navajo were far more aggressive than the Utes. The Utes ended up joining up with with the cavalry later on and helping the cavalry in running off the nomadic type aggressive Navajo Indians. There was a lot of blood spilt on this land. The legend goes that once the Utes and the white man, which would I assume be the cavalry, the army, ran off the Navajo left behind a Skinwalker, which is a shaman that has the abilities to shapeshift into any animal that they choose. And it's like their version of a witch. And they're bad news, supposedly. You don't want no part of no Skinwalker. And so they left behind this shaman, and this shaman has cursed this land, supposedly, and her spirit still dwells there. Or his or her, I should say. Spirit still dwells there. So there are ridiculous amounts of reports, credible reports. I mean, reports from law enforcement, people, the scientists that later on go there and experiment and do research there, the people that live there. I mean, a crazy amount of reports. I mean, this place is like the Area 51, so to speak, of paranormal, hotspots. This place is also a crossroads of different worlds. And what I mean by that is this is one of those places on the earth where you can encounter phantoms, crop circles, interdimensional portals, UFOs, see werewolves or strange creatures. Yeah, pretty wild stuff. So we're going to get into this, okay? So decades later, things came to a head when ranchers Terry and Gwen Sherman bought the property in 1994. Documented in the book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, written by George Knapp and Calm Keller. The Shermans alleged that their cows were mutilated with surgical precision in broad daylight, and that their family was hunted by strange aerial objects and floating orbs of light. They heard disembodied voices, experienced poltergeist-type activity, witnessed horrible monsters emerging from portals, and claimed that they encountered a wolf 3 times larger than any known wolf. And when they shot it several times with a high-powered rifle at point-blank range, the wolf did not die. It did not seem unscathed. Or it seemed unscathed, my bad. Their story became public in the summer of 1996 when investigative journalist George Knapp broke the story and launched the Sherman Ranch, or the now famously known Skinwalker Ranch, into the paranormal spotlight. Weeks later, Las Vegas aerospace billionaire and paranormal aficionado Robert Bigelow bought the ranch from the Shermans for $200,000. Bigelow's National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS, and Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Space Studies, BASS, spent more than 2 decades studying the strange anomalies that apparently occurred on the property. So these two highly advanced scientific teams, backed by a billionaire, spent over 20 years on this property, basically experimenting and researching with the most highest tech available. And they got a lot of crazy shit, okay? And they talk about it all, or most of it in the book and in the documentary. Teams of experts, scientists consisting of investigators, physicists, biologists, biochemists, veterinarians, geologists, and so many more. Like, there's just a whole plethora. Psychiatrists were brought in. I mean, you name it, they brought them in. Okay, and they lived there for 2 years and on the ranch along with the family and just observed everything that was going on. They had the best and most state-of-the-art, excuse me, the best and most state-of-the-art technology money could buy. They rounded up hundreds of eyewitness reports and began a series of paranormal investigations. These counts are true and recorded as such by those involved. This, my friends, is the story of the Skinwalker Ranch. Strange things were occurring at Skinwalker Ranch as the Sherman family witnessed various types of UFOs, crop circles, cattle mutilations, heard disembodied voices, saw strange creatures and interdimensional portals. Okay, one example of some of the craziness that went on there is right here. On March 12th, 1997, biochemist Colm Kelleher, who co-authored the books, saw a big humanoid figure perched in a tree. Okay, this is at nighttime. You know, uh, he basically goes on to state that the only reason he saw the creature was because of its big yellow eyes. And so, I mean, when you watch the documentary, they get into it more. I didn't really write it down here, but Colm Kelleher lifts his rifle, and he's an experienced marksman, as I understand it. And he lifts his rifle and he fires off a shot at this creature. Now, the creature falls out of the tree or jumps out of the tree, one of the two, and lands on the ground, but disappears when it lands on the ground. Okay. So Kelleher said that he fired his rifle at the creature, but before it vanished, but not before he noticed how it looked. He said the shape had large claws and resembled a large predatory bird, and looked very heavy. There was three of them standing there. There was George Knapp, Colm Kelleher, and Mr. Sherman. When they all three ran over to the site where they thought it had fallen dead, they found footprints, large, clawed, raptor-looking footprints in the snow. And there's a mountain behind them, so there was nowhere for this thing to have gone. It just disappeared. Okay, and I mean, what the hell was this thing? I mean, in my mind, I think of a pterodactyl, pterosaur or something like that. That's pretty fucking wild. Anyways, other instances of strange going-ons where two researchers were engaged one night in a conversation when suddenly the family dogs, who were laying by the fire with these two men, jumped up and started growling and snarling inexplicably. The two men heard a pair of disembodied voices speaking an unknown language from somewhere above them. They estimated it was about 25 feet over their heads. When they looked up, there was nothing there. Okay? So it's almost as if these two voices were coming out of another, like a gateway, like some unseen parallel dimension or something. Yet another incident occurred. This is one of my favorites. One afternoon, a creature similar to a direwolf. Okay? Direwolf looks like a wolf, but way bigger. Okay? They estimated this wolf is weighing at least 200 pounds. Okay? It appeared in a pasture field and headed towards them. Mr. Sherman had just finished unloading several of his prized Angus bull calves into a small enclosure near them. They watched as the wolf creature appeared and approached, and it was a massive creature. It was at least 3 times the size of any ordinary wolf, and oddly it had these blue eyes. It was acting very odd as it closed in on the family, seemingly not afraid of them. One of the men walked out to greet the wolf. It slowly approached the man and allowed him to pet it. The wolf seemed unconcerned with the family and acted very odd and very tame, to say the least. One of the family thought, well, maybe this is one of the neighbors' pets. Just about that time, the wolf suddenly turned and grabbed a hold of one of the curious calves that had its head sticking through the bars of the pen. Mr. Sherman then drew out his .357 Magnum and fired 3 shots point blank into the wolf, and the wolf did not flinch. It just, like it was shooting him with a pellet gun. So then, okay, Mr. Sherman says, "Get me my .30-06. And they bring him his .30-06, okay, and he fires another 3 rounds into the wolf, with the third round hitting the wolf in the chest cavity, exiting its back and peeling off a large chunk of its flesh, which lands on the ground. The wolf still seemed unscathed, didn't react to it. It let the calf go on its own accord because it realized that it couldn't get the calf through the bars, and just casually turned around and started trotting off. Mr. Sherman and his son, armed with weapons, their rifles, decided to chase this wolf down and kill it. So they followed it through the pasture field into the cottonwood trees and up to creek, and they tracked its tracks. They could see it on the horizon, you know, and when they finally caught up to it, it had vanished into thin air. Its footprints, it was over 60 feet away from the creek bank, so it didn't jump into the water. It just the tracks just stopped, and there was nowhere it could have went. And it just vanished without a trace. And so moving on here, getting into some more weird stuff. There's a lot more weird stuff that happened. It talks about it in the books. One instance is one night. I might be off on this because I'm just trying to tell it out of memory, but one night several of the researchers were sitting around when they saw a yellow light appear out in the pasture field, and so they all went out to check it out and to see what was going on. And when they get there, they realize this yellow light is actually some kind of portal. And as they stand there and they watch, this giant, shadowy, humanoid figure is crawling through this portal. And that's another, there's more to the story than that. I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't want to give wrong information. Yeah, there's some really trippy shit that happened at this place. And I mean, hundreds of people witnessed it. So it's definitely something worth checking out. Alright, so moving along. In 2017, the New York Times, okay, now the New York Times isn't going to produce a bogus story, you know what I mean, like, unless they're trying to disinformation people, they're not going to fucking accidentally fuck up and post some bogus shit. Okay, so in 2017, the New York Times broke the story of a secretive government UFO program run by the Pentagon counterintelligence staffer Luis Elizondo. According to the article in 2007, a Defense Intelligence Agency official said that visited the ranch and a short time later met with Senator Harry Reid of Nevada. According to the New York Times, Mr. Reid said he met with DIA agency officials shortly after meeting with Mr. Bigelow and learned that they wanted to start a research program on UFOs. The program, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, was given to Bigelow under government contract. His company received $22 million to study and generate reports on exotic science, UFOs, and other anomalous phenomena. Let me stop right there and just say, that's kind of hard to digest, so I'm going to kind of get into this a little bit. So basically, this fucking guy, what was this guy's name again? Oh, it doesn't say. So basically, this fucking guy is saying that he cleared it with the government, with the senator, and then cleared it with Mr. Bigelow, and he brokered a deal, basically, between the two, for Mr. Bigelow to get paid $22 million to use his company, his advanced aerospace company,